you can look at the inner cities of any large city and the fatherless rate and all those things, all that data we always talk about. It seems obvious.
Let me tell you something about data. We changed the education system in the 1930s in the United States of America. Prior to that, we taught kids how to think. Sure. When the 1930s came along, we taught them how to learn what we tell you. You with me on that? You following the logic here? How to be a good student, how to learn. And so the reason we have problems in the inner city is because, and then just fill in the blank. This is what we're teaching you.
Yeah.
So crime, poverty, historical racism. You just fill in the blanks of what it is. Let me tell you something. It doesn't matter what color you are, what creed, what ethnicity, what religion. When dad's at home and doing right, the family's going to be good. All historical evidence says that. That is the issue. But that's not what they're told. So they grow up and they believe what they learned. They were taught to learn.
I'm curious for you to expand on that a little bit. You've seen that as an educator. You've seen that being rolled out in the education system. Is that correct?
Yes, but not where I work, because I work in private education.
Yeah,
Christian education.
I'm curious, just as a note for a listener, and this isn't to bash anybody who has a child in public school.
Right,
but
absolutely not.
What would you say to somebody? Because I get this question asked to me a lot. Public school, private school, I can't afford it. Homeschool, like as a what I would consider a lifelong educator, how would you counsel somebody on wrestling with? Okay, I see this epidemic that we're facing. I don't want my child to be affected by this epidemic. However, I live in a household where both parents have to work. What would you? How would you counsel somebody on?
Yeah.
If they have to be in the public education system, what's the best way for them to navigate that? And then it's maybe some options for them outside of the public education system.
Well, first thing you have to make sure that everybody understands it's the parent's job to educate their kid. It is not the local school district. It's not the state of Texas. And for sure, it's not Washington, D.C. It's the parent's job. That's who was entrusted with that child.
Yeah.
So I would say this. It would be very difficult for me to send my own kid to a large public school where there was not a conservative/Christian influence. There are a lot of great public schools, but they're mostly smaller. When you get above a certain population or in a certain urban area, you're going to have to deprogram your kid every single day or recognize that your child will not have Judeo-Christian ethics. You're going to have to deprogram them. I have seen a lot of good kids come out of large public schools because they have intentional Christian parents. But you better be working overtime and you better be super involved. It's interesting because there's a lot of small schools where the parents in the town determine who's on that school board. They are the school board. They determine the curriculum.
Right. That's right.
I have a someone I better not name here, but there's a person I know that I'm very close to. He and his wife live in a small rural Texas community. The school hired an English teacher, and in the middle of the first quarter, the superintendent walked in, pulled her out of class, and said, "You're fired," because the school board said these are the values of this community, and you're here to enforce it. So that's what I would say. Small schools, you have much more control than large schools. Homeschooling is actually not a bad option. It's not a bad option. Your kids can play sports in homeschool all over, where you couldn't in the past. But I would just say you have to be super involved and you have to be ready to deconstruct ideas that come into your kid's mind if they're in public school. I'm not saying all public schools are bad. There's a lot of conservative Christian public schools.
Yeah.
But you have to know that,
That's
as
good.
a parent.
That's good.
When you talk about these issues, defining terms is really important. And I think for a lot of people, there's confusion around terms like masculinity, toxic masculinity, biblical masculinity, these terms that we would use, and I think we would have some understanding of what they mean. Can you do two things? Can you define kind of those terms? What is toxic masculinity from where you sit, or what is meant by that? What's the difference or the contrast between that and biblical masculinity? And then how do we let's start with our own kids. I've got two boys. One he's a 23-year-old police officer, so I hope he's all right, but I want to continue to mentor him.
If he's a police officer, he's the most masculine person
he's,
that ever stepped foot on the earth.
He's definitely confused, so I need to continue to work with him. But then I'll continue to mentor my son. But I have a 15-year-old football player actually who's coming up, and I want to help him. And so let's define the terms, and then how do we raise our own young men to have clarity around this understanding of manhood and be able to lead in a culture that's so kind of anti-biblical manhood?
Yeah. Well, so first of all, there's actually no such thing as toxic masculinity. Right. It's just made up.
Sure.
It's, when you want to revolutionize a society, the first thing you do is hijack language.
Mm-hmm. That's why I think it's so important to define terms.
Yep. Yeah. Number one. So, but what is meant by it is we have let's call it what it is. It's an anti-Christian, anti-American traditional American values. It's an anti-revolution in the country. It's really a far left revolution, similar to what was created in 1917 in Russia, to be honest with you. But the bottom line is it is anti-American, anti-Bible. And you're a toxic male if you disagree with our main tenets. Mm-hmm. That's really what they mean.
Right.
When you disagree with us and you do traditional masculinity or Judeo-Christian ethics as your platform, you're toxic. That's how they define that.
It's against the country and against the Bible. Mm-hmm. If someone were screaming outside of our doors right now about toxic masculinity, most of the time what they would believe that means is it's the kind of masculinity that is abusive to women and children. It's that over-the-top, hypersexualized masculinity. But you're saying it's something else.
I am. I'm saying when you disagree with my revolutionary agenda, I'm going to label you.
Right.
And part of that labeling is toxic, misogynist, racist, intolerant.
But the actual intention of the person who really believes in this idea of toxic masculinity, it's not to tear down a misogynist or a racist or anyone else. It's to label a strong person so that they can't have the same impact on the country and the same impact in terms of Christian values. So it really is a shell game that they're playing with language.
Yes, because what happens is a person can be disregarded as soon as they're racist.
Yeah.
Oh, we're not going to, he's racist.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, this guy's like Hitler.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's a misogynist.
Yeah.
If you label people correctly, then you give permission for millions of people to disregard their opinion.
Right.
So instead of taking on the idea, you don't want to have the idea, so let's just get rid of the person. Yeah. That's where I think toxic masculinity falls into that. You mentioned, what's the kind of the opposite of masculinity or of toxic masculinity, which is of course biblical masculinity is what I would say.
Right.
But when they say toxic masculinity, notice there's no such thing as toxic femininity.
Sure.
It only goes one way. I think there are a lot of moms who maybe abandon their kids, get strung out on drugs, do all this stuff. They don't call it toxic. Bad behavior is bad behavior. And it goes back to what you said. There's an attack on males specifically.
Right.
And because there's a Judeo-Christian theme that says, like, for instance, a male would be the leader of his household spiritually and in multiple other ways. Well, the way you get rid of that is you demean that person. So you say toxic masculinity.